Okay, so welcome to another one of our GCSE revision sessions. This is the penultimate, the final unit really. Obviously we covered rivers and coasts and natural hazards in terms of tectonics and climate, and so we move on to our final one, which is settlement. Okay, obviously part of your population and settlement question, so you might get a mixture of sort of population issues, but you might get some settlement ones as well. And actually, the sort of bridge between the two is the ideas that we're going to look at in this video, which is urbanisation and counter-urbanisation. Okay, so straight off the bounce, urbanisation, the movement of people to an urban area causing it to grow, okay? Or, another way to put it, the growth of urban areas caused by the migration of people from rural areas, okay? That sort of idea. And obviously people tend to be attracted by sites like this, okay? So if you think that, if we move that out of the way a minute, and obviously if we look down here, if I just move to my right a bit, obviously we're talking about rural areas that look like this really, okay? And obviously urbanisation occurs because people are wanting to move from rural areas with their lack of facilities, their lack of services, their lack of opportunities, and wanting to move into urban areas, which is why urbanisation is a very common thing in LEDCs. There we go, the process through which an increasing percentage of a country's population lives in urban areas. So we'll give that as our official definition, okay? And as I say, it's very popular, it's a very popular thing in LEDCs. So therefore you can start to link in the idea of sort of migration, because you've got rural to urban migration. The whole push and pull, if you know it for migration, then you'll be absolutely fine in terms of knowing it for urbanisation. And of course, the biggest issue that you've got in LEDCs is then the growth of these, our good old shanty towns, okay? And you can get questions about the conditions, like problems that exist in shanty towns. So obviously things like disease, things like overcrowding, things like obviously rubbish piled up. Be prepared to explain why that's a problem. Okay, unsafe housing, you know, it's piled on top of each other, susceptible to things like floods or like avalanches or mudslides, okay, in some parts of the world. Check back through your information and make sure that you are aware of the problems that exist in these shantytown areas. As I say, your common ones: disease, overcrowding, lack of facilities, lack of like clean water, sometimes lack of electricity or like unreliable electricity supply is a better thing to write these days. Many sort of councils have been able to put electricity in these areas, but such is the sheer number of houses trying to use it, they often get blackouts, okay? Crime, particularly sort of drug use, and drug dealing, that can be quite common in our shanty towns as well. Obviously that is a negative aspect of urbanisation, and I think the thing to be aware of is obviously what the conditions are like, but also, okay, sort of solutions. So like local, as we said, local councils investing in services, investing in amenities, investing in rubbish collection. Do be aware as well of where they are located, okay? So in LEDC cities, our shanty towns tend to be on the edge of those cities or on main routes into the city centre. They're on the edge because often there's no clear, what's the word I'm looking for? There's no clear, like, rights as to who owns the land on the edge of the city. So therefore it's very easy for them to come and set up there and build their house, and it could often be quite a while before the council comes along and solves that problem, okay? So yeah, cheap land, or like it's unclear who owns it, and then obviously on main transport routes into the city, that can often be to do with easy access, so that therefore they can go and find jobs. There's a job opportunity idea, take sort of simple informal jobs like street selling, like shoe shining, things like that, okay? So as I say, be aware of your problems of urbanisation, particularly in LEDCs, and it's a focus in LEDCs these days because urbanisation has tended to happen already in LEDCs. Okay, so as I say, sample questions. State two features from the photograph that suggest this is part of a shanty town. Houses are close together. Building materials look quite basic. housing sort of stacked near or on top of each other, that sort of idea. 2 locations within a large LEDC city where you would find such housing, as I say, on the outskirts or on those main transport routes. And for the final time, make sure you obviously know the problems that exist in these shanty towns. In MEDCs then, it's very much the idea of counter-urbanisation and the movement of people out of cities into the surrounding countryside, okay? And it's the growth of rural areas, the growth of rural villages, rural towns, as a result of people migrating from the city to countryside areas. And of course it's pictures like this, okay, that tend to promote the idea of counter-urbanisation, right? A quiet, idyllic lifestyle, a peaceful environment, okay, nice scenery, small amount of shops, a village feel, a village community, and often, because there are transport links to their place of work, okay, to sort of cities and urban areas from our rural areas, okay, so you've got that. And I think the biggest thing that you will often have is the idea of the positives and negatives of counter-urbanisation, okay. So some of you might have seen this used in lessons, okay. So often positives. It can lead to new affordable housing built to try and keep the rural population living in the area, okay, as well as obviously house new people coming in and actually target like young couples and young families so that you get like a balance in demographics, okay. In terms of transport, it can often, counter-urbanisation can often lead to sort of maybe widening of country roads to improve access, but certainly an improvement in public transport, okay? So you might get new bus routes, you might get more regular bus routes, okay? You might get a redevelopment of like a local train station, so there is that as an advantage. If I sort of just move over slightly, shops, services and employment, people who come into rural villages through counter-urbanisation can often set up new shops, new businesses, and therefore you have like job opportunities created, okay? So always have 3 in mind, and as I say, like cheap affordable housing can often be built, improvement in transport, and improvement in shops, therefore job opportunities, and also services. You might see an extension, like investment in the local primary school. You might see a greater number of GPs attracted to the surgery to deal with the growing population, so therefore healthcare services improve. In terms of negatives, obviously, the greater amount of development can often spoil that idyllic landscape, can spoil the idyllic environment, the peaceful environment, as more housing is needed. An increase in traffic levels can often lead to congestion, even in rural areas at like peak times when people are going to work and then going home. Okay, the housing often increases. People buy houses in rural villages as second homes, and then they don't live in them for parts of the year, but that then drives up the price of housing in the area. So therefore people have to move away, because unless those affordable housing areas are built, then people have no choice but to go to the further into the city to find affordable housing, okay? So you've got housing becomes more expensive, younger people are forced to move away to find a place to live, and to some extent, because obviously people who come to live in rural areas tend to have their own cars, they may actually travel to supermarkets further afield, and so what you actually end up with is local shops, local village shops actually closing down, and jobs being lost as a result of people moving or using their own private transport to go to supermarkets, to go into the city centre to buy the things that they need. Okay, so when reviewing this video, make sure you are aware of the idea, the key term of urbanisation and the key term of counter-urbanisation. Make sure you're aware that urbanisation is very much an LEDC phenomenon these days, that people want to move from rural areas to urban areas. Be aware of the push and pull reasons for that. Same idea as migration, and then be aware obviously that a product of urbanisation and LEDCs is shanty towns, where they are and what the problems are that exist in them, and then counter-urbanisation, obviously that movement of people from urban areas to surrounding rural areas, and be aware of the advantages that brings to those rural areas, but also be aware of the problems. They're all the topics, the themes of classic 4-mark questions, 2 and 4-mark questions. Okay? Lovely.